This podcast is speeding.
1, 2,
Stand by, Phil.
3, 4.
Go, Phil.
Come on. What?
Where's all that confidence now?
What? The heckola. Oh my gosh. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of I Already Told You That.
Yeah,
You sure?
in the past, but it has happened.
I mean, this is some like clowns coming in on a car, like tomfoolery you're trying to pull over on me
Your
right now.
interpretations of your
It's
first listens
amazing.
of music are my favorite part about this podcast.
It's amazing.
Yes.
I mean, it's like somebody playing those horns that they have at like a soccer game. That's what they're doing right there.
Yeah.
And then
perhaps.
somebody like tinkly tankling on a garbage pan lid. All right. That's fine. That's
Uh-huh.
fine.
Okay,
All
sure.
right. That's fine. Melissa, how are you?
I'm doing okay.
You doing all right?
Yeah, we're almost leaving the U.S., so
That's right.
it's bittersweet. I feel like we haven't seen as many people as we wanted to. And if you're one of those people listening to this podcast being like, why didn't we see you? We didn't have a lot of time.
Busy.
We were kind of busy. And but we're looking forward to being back in Italy.
Now, why are we in the U.S. in the
doing
first
stuff?
place? I mean, we're...
Well, let's first say what this podcast is
Oh,
about. maybe.
that's right. We got to say
go
what this
there.
thing is so people know what they're getting into. So what is this podcast about, Melissa?
Well, this is a podcast about music.
Okay.
And every week I'm bringing Bryan, who's sitting over there,
Mm-hmm.
some music that he has heard or possibly heard in our house, but most of the time he's heard. And we've, been playing. I've been playing this music for about over 20 years in our house, so I'm always surprised at the things that didn't get in. So part of the reason we're doing this podcast is to remember things and to see if they'll stick.
Yes.
And so we're going to go through the music of this artist, and he doesn't know who we're covering until I play that music at the top of the podcast. And so I also make a playlist that goes along with it, and it's on YouTube Music or Spotify, where you can listen to it. It's under I Already Told You That. So we're only going to play little bits of music, but we're going to go through the catalog of this artist and see if we can get you to remember it and maybe appreciate it a bit.
Absolutely.
It's kind of
And
happens.
I always like to throw in the fact that it's also about people who have influenced your music.
Very much so.
The things that you like listening to. And, Melissa, you've always done that for me. And we've talked to some other people
Yes,
in this series that we're
Yes.
doing here while we're on the road.
What are we calling our summer series?
Summer series. No, that sounds like
I know, it
some
sounds-
really boring.
It sounds like some theater camp, like kind of production. Our summer
It's
series.
the summer series. Just bring the retirees over and we'll
No.
get you guys out. No, it's family and friends.
And so we're doing it how we usually do it, where I would tell you about some music. But because it's the summer and we can visit people,
That's right.
we're bringing other folks in to do it with us. And this time I'm doing it with my friend Andy Runkle. And we are going to talk to
Yes.
you about a musician. We're not telling you yet. And we're going to have some fun. And because I think I like this artist a lot, but I think my friend Andy knows a lot more than I do. So I'm looking forward to learning some things myself, because I very much appreciate this person, but I think he knows even more. So it's one of the people I've had on my list of doing, and he gave me the opportunity to feel really comfortable doing it.
So
I'm
that's
really
a clue.
excited.
It's a single person.
Oh, darn it. He's totally going to get it now.
So you said Andy's your friend. He's my friend too.
Nope.
From a long time now. So if things sound a little different, we're here in the home of
It's true.
Andy. Andy,
And welcome.
Welcome to you.
It's great to be here.
Thanks for being here.
It's great to be here as a fan of your show.
Oh my gosh, man.
Your support has meant so much, really. Thank you.
Absolutely. And definitely somebody who's turned me on to things over the years, not only as a listener of music, but also a player of music, Andy. We've found ourselves in basements, in moldy basements together, playing in the Lost Gospels.
That's true.
Were there
it's a
any
thing.
other iterations of that, or was it always Lost
Which
Gospels?
is the band that Andy was in.
That's
Yes,
right.
yes.
With Good old Rob.
That was the only band name we ever had.
Okay. Because there's other bands we played and they changed a lot.
That's true.
Yeah.
I will throw out the teaser,
Okay.
though, that I stole a little piece of this artist's, of a little song by this artist to make a recording many years ago.
That's a good clue. That's a good clue. I like it.
But I will also tell you, it's not a song we ever played live. So that
that's a
doesn't.
bad clue.
It's a bad clue all of a sudden. It's a bad clue all of a sudden. No, and I was thinking this morning too about because one of the things I do love about the show is how much I know that I struggle to remember things.
Good. I am glad to hear I'm not the only one.
And so particularly with this artist, there are two big chunks of my life where she...
No, you're giving him too much. Let's let him guess before we tell him too much. Maybe we should have him guess before.
I can.
Okay.
No, that only makes it worse, honestly. I mean,
Okay.
I could scratch off both the things I've written down.
No. Keep it. I want to hear both of them. I'm dying to hear them.
Was a big part of my listening life.
Okay.
And we can get into that more later in terms of when that was, when I first heard of this artist, in fact, maybe.
Okay.
But
Well, so I will say, Bryan.
Yes.
Before this podcast,
Yes.
because we're on our summer road trip, you and I have been having a little game before each one where I write down, when it was Turn the Tables, when you were telling me about an artist, I wrote down who I thought it was before I even heard the music.
Yep.
So I want to hear your guess that you wrote down before you heard the music, and then you could tell me what you think after. Can you tell us what's on the piece of paper?
Before we do that, Melissa,
Yes.
before we do that, I do want to ask Andy a question.
Okay.
Andy, how is it that you got into music? What was your entry into listening to music? Was there someone who influenced you? Or were you like Melissa, where you just go randomly buy things at the store? How did that happen for you?
That's a great question. So when I was in junior high, there was this artist named Amy Grant.
Okay.
Love will
Hold on,
find
let
a
me
way.
get my pen here. 1 second.
Who is, by the way, not who we're doing today.
Yeah.
That would have been
That would
fun.
be interesting, though.
But Amy Grant was probably the first tape I ever owned.
Okay.
Because of who she was and what she was doing and where I was in life and what I was doing. And that quickly somehow magically drifted into Paul Simon and the Rolling Stones.
Okay.
And
So you're kind of on your own here.
REM. I was definitely on my own.
Are you the oldest sibling?
I am the oldest sibling.
Me too.
And so there was a lot of just listening to popular radio, which for me didn't end up including a lot of what I listened to in my 20s.
Right.
So I started absorbing more of that from friends late in high school, and then in college things kind of exploded in terms of
Blew up
hearing
from there.
new things, including today's artists.
Okay. So, and I heard REM in there, so I'm sure REM was certainly an entry drug to a lot of things. Because in my day, it was like that was college rock.
Exactly.
You know, and then you could kind of go from there. So,
Very much. And so, in those days, a band like that and who they played with or who they talked about was then how you would jump to, okay, I'm going to learn about Vic Chestnut, or I'm going to learn about Kristen Hirsch, because they
10,000 Maniacs, all those
Right,
things.
I'm going to learn
Kristen
Hirsch. You can write that down.
Okay.
Write down
We
10,000
already-
Maniacs.
We already covered Kristen Hirsch. She's in Throwing Muses.
oh, okay, I'm gonna scratch that one off the list. There we go. Okay,
Write down 10,000 Maniacs.
10,000. Okay, good.
Okay. So what was on your piece of paper,
Oh
Bryan?
my gosh! So I mean, initially when you told me that Andy was gonna be part of the thing, I immediately zoned in on the band whose name I can never remember, but I do remember. Or I do have one of their records.
Like who?
No, Luna.
Okay, you thought it's Galaxy 500.
Or Galaxy
We did
500.
talk about it. That was on the list.
I figured
It was
those
on
might
the
be
list.
on the
Short
list.
list.
They were
It was on the short list.
Okay,
Short
good. So I wasn't too far off. But this wacky music that you're playing for me.
No, that's not. Oh, what you're not going to go away from that
That's
list,
what I
though.
wrote down, Melissa.
That's all you wrote.
That's
okay,
all I put
that's
on the
what I make
list.
sure. You're right. He wrote Luna and Galaxy 500.
You were onto us.
Did you know that they were the same person, the one person?
I did know that. And the way that I found out Galaxy 500 was about 8 seconds ago. I Googled Luna and then found the guy.
You never remember about Galaxy 500. I've talked to you about them so many times.
I remember about them. I just can't remember the damn name of
I'm
the
going to speed up that
band.
one. Okay. So now that you've heard the music, what do you think, maybe?
Oh my gosh. So it's a woman and it's someone that you both like listening to. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to throw the name Laurie Anderson out there.
How'd you guess that?
I don't know, but I pulled it off.
You're right.
Wow.
I don't know. Did the clues, context clues help you though?
Yes.
Wow. I don't think you could do it without your context clues, Andy.
And honestly, 1,000%, I have no idea about Laurie Anderson.
I know.
It's just a name. It's just pure association.
Well, let's give you some context.
Between you, because seriously, I do not know a single damn thing. Other than
it's
the
I know. That's what we're excited about.
You're telling me I'm right. I guessed correctly.
You guessed correctly.
Yes.
Which in some ways for me is a little bit even more exciting because you're not saying when we would have revealed it, I've never even heard of that person.
No,
so
no.
He has heard me say her name. I have mentioned her quite a bit. So I mean,
no,
makes me so
I am
happy.
1,000% excited right now.
Okay,
this is really good.
It's so good.
That's a good thing.
All right, I'm ready. I am now your student. Teach me.
And there's reasons that I was excited about this in terms of some of what I think you love about music.
Okay.
And so, so that's Melissa, just to ask you a question.
Okay.
Sure.
When do you remember first hearing of this artist?
I think that she had been in the atmosphere, so to speak. But I know the first time I really paid attention was on So, which is Peter Gabriel's record, which we're going to hear at some point. We're going to hear that track. She collaborated with him, and that was the first time I really heard her do things. But I had heard probably different things that we're going to get into, like Go Superman, I think I'd seen it on MTV. I had known of her. I'd seen her with the violin. I'd seen her in her suits, and I'd seen her spiky hair, and I'd seen her records. But I think that's when I first started kind of getting a little more into it and enjoying it. That was more my gateway, which I wish I had heard. United States Live, I've heard, but in different increments. But I never really listened to that record as much as I did Big Science, which is weird to me now because I really do like the other one more. But at the time, I think that was more of the gateway that everyone mostly had, I think. Right. I shouldn't speak for everyone, but it was more popular. It was more around. Okay. And we'll get into it.
And this is
more.
all Greek to me so far.
So we're going to help you with it in a minute. But how did you first hear of Laurie Anderson?
Yes.
So I had to remember this to get ready for today. But so when I was a freshman in college, one of our freshman seminar classes was called Ancient Wisdom, Modern Love.
Whoa. What now? Come on.
That's a great class.
It was
basically
it was taught by a philosopher. So he was mostly he specialized in Greek philosophy. And in the spring part of the class, we watched Stop Making Sense.
Nice.
Followed by Home of the Brave, which is Laurie Anderson's kind of live stage show. She asked Jonathan Demme to do it after Stop Making Sense.
Okay.
And then we watched True Stories, the Talking Heads movie.
Oh, right.
And
this was a music class?
No. So this was a we've learned about Greek philosophy and drama and plays and the Greek chorus in the fall, and now in the spring we're going to see how modern artists might address both romance, love, and also putting on a show.
Wow.
And so this guy, I think, just happened to love David Byrne and Laurie Anderson, which is why we were watching these performances. So that was the beginning for me. So you had actually a study.
You had a formal education with Laurie Anderson.
Truly.
Yeah, and that's a great gateway into it, though, to see that kind of performance, which we'll get into a little more, but we probably should give him some foundational things to kind of help, and then we'll get into that stuff maybe a little bit.
Let's get into it.
So what I know loosely about Laurie Anderson, and I had to get a little help to remember some of the things because I knew them, some of them. So I didn't know that her first degree when she graduated college was in art history. And then I did know about her sculpture work. She went on to get a BA in sculpture, not BA, excuse me, her master's in sculpture in Columbia.
MFA.
In New York. And then she also studied violin.
Okay.
And eventually you're going to learn about, she's also an inventor. So she has many hats. But the first one I would say that is the most important is she's an avant-garde artist.
Okay.
She works with language and technology and different media to express those things. But it's very interesting. Much in the, she had worked with William S. Burroughs. There's lots of different artists at that time period, the New York scene that she was working with in the 70s. She was doing a lot of work. And first,
Philip Glass.
Yeah, Philip Glass. So she was working in the
John Cage.
which is interesting. She didn't
Okay.
meet Lou Reed till later, but at the time she didn't know him. But the first concert she ever did, the first performance piece she ever did, was a car horn orchestra.
Okay.
Before the Flaming Lips.
Before, yes.
Okay.
Long before.
Yes, and she did that in 1969.
Is that what we started with?
No.
Okay.
No.
Because that had some horns in it.
So she's a pioneer in electronic music. She invented this thing called the tape bow violin, the talking stick, and she has all these various voice filters.
Okay.
So she can do a lot of things.
You'll
Hear all of that. We're going to get into all the inventions and stuff.
Cool.
But I just want you to kind of understand, as a big thing, kind of what she's known for, but also, so she was foremost an artist.
Yeah.
And then she had this song she would perform that was called Oh Superman. And she put it on a single, it was a limited edition single, and it became so popular that she then put out a whole record. And that single became a #2 hit in the UK.
Oh, wow.
Do you know who made it a #2 hit?
Who?
John Peel.
Oh, of course. Mr. Peel.
So she kind of blames him and credits him for making her
recording
famous
artist.
in the UK.
Super famous.
Right. So she had a couple copies of this single. It's an 8-minute song.
Okay.
And it most famously became this #2 pop hit in the UK because he played it over and over, and then people were wanting it. And she apparently asked Warner Brothers if they could help her put this song out, and they were like, "Oh no, but you can sign a huge contract."
Here's a 7-album deal. And
Can you guys just help me with this one song?
isn't that crazy? And
It's crazy.
You'll hear it at some point, and you'll
Yeah.
understand it's a cool song, but you're it's amazing that it did what it did, because it's still it's not. She didn't commercialize
Accessible,
it. It's still very much what she does.
And so I'll say one
Yes,
other thing
please.
before we start too. I played the violin.
Okay, yeah,
And
right.
so, and at the time, as I moved on in college, I was dating a feminist.
Okay.
And so we then got more into Laurie Anderson and ended up seeing her
I
live,
think the same show I saw.
which, just, furthered my, I'll call it enchantment.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, and
This
so
is
we're
great.
going to take you on a little musical journey. I
This
think the
is
things you will
fantastic.
like about her is her experimentation with the technology.
Okay.
And art and music. I mean, that's what makes it really intriguing to me. I always like when people aren't doing, they're breaking the mold. They're not really even interested in it to begin
It's
with.
kind of oddly a theme in some of the last
It
few
is.
that we've done
It
here
is.
of people who are in bands but are also just kind of wacky artists that can't help themselves.
Those are the best kind.
Yeah,
I think.
so.
Yeah, and also I think Andy and I both agree on this. She needs more props than she gets.
Yes.
Okay.
And that was partly why I was
Yeah,
excited.
yeah.
But
Okay.
this first big chunk of music is a live performance.
Okay.
And it was apparently her response to being asked the question when she was living in Europe for many years in the 70s by folks she knew there, how can you live in America? And so she claims that what she did was begin to produce this talking opera that is 8 hours long. The recorded version is 4.5 hours long.
Okay.
So partly why this may not be something that's everybody's first entry point is that this includes lots of experimental noises, sounds, recordings, but it's also ridiculously long.
Yeah.
Even the pared down version. And it's called United States, parts 1 through 4.
Okay.
And what we're going to play pieces of is from a 4-night run where this was performed in 83.
In
and
the US?
recorded, exactly, in Brooklyn. And it was recorded by Warner Brothers. And I will also say as we start, there's no video of what was going on stage.
Okay.
I was showing Bryan the cover because the cover is great.
Yeah, with the light in her mouth.
She's got a light in her mouth.
She uses it when she performs, too.
She's had it like surgically implanted?
No, it comes in. She takes it out.
Okay.
But if you cut all the lights on stage and the only thing is a light in your mouth,
that's why
and
I wanted
you're
you to
singing,
see it. That's why I wanted
That's
you to
pretty
see
rad.
it.
And
It's
so
pretty
it's
cool.
probably like an old school light bulb with like a 9-volt connected to it or something somehow inside of her mouth.
There's also
Wowzers.
something that I don't have on here as a section, but she used something called a pillow speaker, which you would put in your pillow at night in the 70s to like learn things while you slept. It would play things. She put it in her mouth and it would play things, and she would change her shape of her mouth to make different pitches and different tones, and it was pretty wonky.
So is she American?
She
Yes.
is.
Okay.
Yeah, we get to claim her. And isn't it cool?
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
All
We don't
right.
have
So she's-
many of these crazy innovators. She's one.
Nice.
Grew
Okay.
up outside of Chicago.
Oh.
And as you'll see when you go through too, she was raised in a particularly Christian background that influences a lot of the topics and stories that she would, talk about and reinvent.
Okay.
So this first section is called the Difficult Listening Hour, apropos. And this features something that she used a lot, which was a harmonizer that would down pitch her voice to sound like a man.
Okay.
And she would call this the voice of authority.
Okay.
And she also referred to it as audio drag, where she got
Okay.
to impersonate various characters, often having one microphone where she would have her regular voice and another microphone where she would have the male voice or other differently pitched voices.
And did she do this before she did didn't she do a show or something where she did that on television where she would be a female character and then a male character interviewing herself?
Exactly.
Yeah.
This was before that,
Okay.
but this was, and
Inspired.
this is just an example of the lower pitched voice. She's not oscillating on this.
Gotcha.
So,
All right.
Difficult listening hour.
Welcome to Difficult Listening Hour. The spot on your dial for that relentless and impenetrable sound of difficult music. So sit bolt upright in that straight back chair. Button that top button and get set for some difficult music.
and so I don't have the song lengths in front of me, but one of the things that's great about this is that
It's 3 minutes and 11 seconds.
Okay. Some of these songs that we'll listen to in the next bunch are 30 seconds long. Some of them are 12 minutes long. And so that's one of the things that I also loved about this as a youngster was appreciating that it was okay to write a song or record a song that was less than a minute.
Yeah. And it was
if that was
completely
the song.
wacky.
Right.
And whatever was coming out of your head.
Right, and that so that was one thing that was just kind of freeing about it was that everything doesn't have to be 3 minutes and 30 seconds.
Yeah. Wow. So you could hear people laughing in that. So it was almost like it was a bit of there's commentary going on for sure, right? And they're kind of like getting into whatever this is going to be.
Well, it feels interactive in a
Yeah.
sense because I've seen her live and so has Andy, and it does feel like she really crafts it in such a way that you're going along with it.
And you don't have to. I mean, the reason I mentioned there's no video of it is there's huge projections going on behind her and the band. So at that point in the late 70s and early 80s, she was creating her own visuals, but you can't. There's no way to easily watch that and see what people. So sometimes they're laughing at the content.
Oh, I see what you're
the
saying.
audio content. Sometimes they're laughing at whatever's going on the. And I'll
Yeah.
tell you an example of that. But they're laughing about what's going on behind her on this
okay.
huge screen. But
Okay.
I think that was another innovation as a concert artist was it's not just that we have a pretty background, it's that this content is also fitting with the audio.
Okay.
So this next track is called The Late Show.
Okay.
And this is an example of Melissa had referenced the tape bow violin.
Okay.
And so the innovation there is that in the 70s, instead of having the bow have horsehair,
Okay.
she would take a strip of audio tape,
Magnetic.
Nice.
put it on the bow, and then instead of the bridge of the violin would be a tape head reader.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
Her invention.
genius. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
And she's changed it throughout the years. Like all these inventions, she keeps tweaking.
So as she's dragging it across the strings, but it's the tape head.
There's no strings on
there's no
this.
strings. She's just dragging it across the tape head. Oh
Exactly.
my God.
So you're watching her play a violin, and it looks like that, but what you're hearing are different short sections of audio that are on the bow.
On the bow.
And depending on which way she's, moving the bow across the tape, the speed, she's controlling what you hear.
Damn.
And so this particular sample happens to be a William Burroughs phrase.
Okay.
And they were performing together at this point.
But they had
Okay.
already done. They did. Is it before that they had done like that more artistic? Because before she had been releasing things, she did like an album with him where one side was him and one side was her. Was that before this too?
That was before this.
I think so.
Yep,
Yeah.
that was before
So
this.
she's using some of that.
So anyway, this is...
Late Show.
Listen to my heartbeat.
So is all of that also the tape bow? That sound we were just hearing, that like doom, 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 doom?
No. So that's the band.
Okay.
And she's in on the stage playing. Sorry, she's playing that sample of his voice.
It's almost like scratching in a way, right? But God, that's crazy. That's a fantastic idea.
And she does things with MIDI as well, like that talking stick is a MIDI thing. So I know you appreciate the sorts of things. Can you explain MIDI to people, Bryan? just
Oh
in
my
case?
God, what?
No,
It's
Please,
just, I mean,
help
you might
us.
be able to explain it better. What MIDI is, not
So-
what her invention is, but you could explain that part.
yeah, it's just a way of connecting a keyboard to a computer and playing a note on a keyboard, and it registers as digital signal on a computer, and then you can grab that note and drag it up and down and put it wherever you want.
Or a stick, which is what she did it with.
Okay, yeah. So it just makes like individual notes infinitely manipulatable.
And she would talk into it, so it was a talking stick. So it would
wow.
do that with the pitch when she would move it.
Yeah, so then once it's in a digital form, then you can apply all kinds of crazy stuff to it. So
Thank you.
you're welcome.
There's lots of other violin inventions, lighting the violin from the inside. There's a famous thing she did in the 70s where she had a playback violin that had speakers inside so she could duet with herself. So she would go out on the street, and most famously she would wear ice skates and put them in blocks of ice and stand on the street in Italy or New York and start the playback and then start to play the violin with herself. And she would say that the show would end when the ice melted and she lost her balance.
Yeah, yeah. So she had these blocks of ice, and she wouldn't stop until it was gone.
Her feet were in the skates?
They were in the
blocks of
skates,
ice?
in the blocks of ice. She was standing. She was standing.
And it didn't end. You know, that takes a little while.
And
it's
then
going to
feet
melt.
must
but-
be freezing in those blocks of ice. My goodness.
Well, not the feet, just the blade.
Just the blades are. In
Oh, just the blade.
yeah. So she's in the ice skates,
Got
basically
you.
like standing on these blocks of ice.
Understood.
But it's a attention grabber. So this next one is called New York Social Life.
Okay.
And it is. This is an example of using two different microphones at once.
Okay.
So one of those is an actual telephone that has a little different sound to it. And she's also holding a sitar-like instrument that she's plucking. And I'm just going to let this one do its thing.
New York Social Life.
Well, I was lying in bed one morning, trying to think of a really good reason to get up, and the phone rang, and it was Jerry, and she said,
Hey, hi, how are you? What's going on? How's your work?
oh, fine, just waking up, but it's fine. How's yours?
Oh, a lot of work, I'm trying to make some money, too. Listen, I gotta get back to it. I just thought I'd call to see how you are. And I said,
Yeah, we really should get together next week, and have lunch and talk. And
she said, yeah, I'll be in touch.
Okay.
Okay.
Listen, take care.
Take it easy.
I'll see you.
I'll call you.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
So what I like about this is that it is now like a time capsule, right? Because I guess people talk on the phone, but phones don't sound like phones anymore. Right. There's a time when all phones kind of sounded that way, and it just. So this is, you're saying, like the late 70s, would you say?
Yep, this was the late 70s.
And that's fantastic. I love that. I also, for some reason, think about George Carlin. Is that a wild association?
Is it because that was like probably the live record you had in your house, was to hear someone on stage?
Well,
maybe?
Yeah, no, I never had a George Carlin record, but just that kind of cadence and things like that.
So, two quick things.
Yeah.
She was friends with Andy Kaufman.
Okay.
And they did a lot of little acts together where she would function as his straight man.
Okay.
Whether it was wrestling or getting on amusement park rides and trying to scare people. Yes.
That's too far off.
There's a lot of humor in those 4.5 hours.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that, in picking little snippets of this, when I think about it being both creepy sometimes, funny a lot of the time, and also critical of all of us in a great way.
Sure.
There's another little section of this one. I'll just say this goes on for many minutes of her having these phone conversations. But here's.
And the phone rings, and it's Alan, and he says,
Hey, hi, listen, I'm going to have a show on cable TV, and it's going to be about loneliness. People in the city who, for whatever psychological, sociological, philosophical reasons, just can't seem to communicate. The gap. It'll be a talk show, and people will phone in, but we will say at the beginning of each program, listen, don't call in with your personal problems, because we don't want to hear them.
And I'm going to sleep, and it rings again, and it's Mary, and she says,
Hey, Laurie, hi.
That's great. Well, just the idea that you'd have a phone-in, radio show. I guess that kind of happens, but...
And the idea that you really wouldn't want to hear people's problems.
Because most of them then were about hearing about people's problems. For sure.
Yeah.
And so the next one is a family favorite.
Okay.
This is called So Happy Birthday, and it is very long, I believe, the actual track.
It's 6 minutes and 23 seconds.
Okay. But this is one that my oldest son, the other point in life where I listened to a lot of Laurie was when Oliver was about 6 or 7, and he loved a lot of the humor, but also got into some of the kind of darker stuff that we'll get to later. But this is one that, we kind of still quote around our house.
All right, let's check it out.
So happy birthday.
In our country, you're free, and so you're born, and so they say, you're free. So happy birthday. And even if you were born to lose, even if you were a complete wreck when you were born, you might still grow up to be president, because you're free.
Today.
And so these are two friends of hers who are doing the recording, and the next little section is immediately what follows, so it's probably best to just go ahead and go for it.
We'll edit this part right here. Sorry, I didn't have it up. Okay.
Today you might be an average citizen, a civilian, a pedestrian, but tomorrow you might be elected to some unexpected office or sell your novel and suddenly become famous. Or you could get run over by a truck, and your picture could get into the papers that way. Because you're free, and anything might happen, so happy birthday.
It's great because it's almost like, you know, those inspirational videos or like films you might watch in school, like someone trying to, you know, build you up.
You don't
Fantastic.
hear enough of those accents on recordings, like that Wisconsin kind of like, you just don't hear it as much, and I'm happy to hear it.
Yeah, no, it's true. And there's just one other little section from this that'll kind of end the more humorous portion of our program.
And then we're going to get serious on you.
Going to get
Ready?
super serious.
So long.
Well, he didn't know what to do, so he decided to just watch the government and see what the government was doing and kind of scale it down to size and run his life that way.
She said the hardest thing to teach her 3-year-old kid was what was alive and what wasn't. The phone rings, and she holds it out to her kid and says, "It's Grandma, talk to Grandma." But she's holding a piece of plastic, and the kid says, "Hey, wait a minute. Is the phone alive? Is the TV alive? What about that radio?" What is
Valid questions. Valid questions.
Asking lots of good questions.
All
Yeah.
the good questions.
And so that organ bit is just going to go on for 6.5 minutes.
Oh my gosh.
And so that's just something you have to be ready for.
And you would be if you were there.
I think so. I would be into it for sure.
So what are your impressions so far, Bryan? How
I
are you
mean,
feeling?
it's fantastic. It's like, you know, it's not necessarily music as you would traditionally think of it. It's a lot of spoken word and things like that. But I'm into it. I liked Burroughs back in the day.
Yeah, and I think that's the fun part about
He'll
it.
be back.
And not, yeah, he will be back. Is that I think it's good to, like, you know, now that we're doing this together, kind of expose you, I guess, to a little
Yes.
bit more deeply. To,
Oh,
like,
yes.
because there's a lot of time you'll say to me, like, they're like an artist. Like they're like a straight up artist. And you're not being like flippant. You just mean
Weird.
like you're like, wait, they're like really completely, and it's true. There are musicians that are a lot more, I think, on the artistic tinge than
Yeah.
other people.
Yeah.
You know, and I think, and I always think that's the majority, but it's not true. You know?
Right.
And so there's like, it's like a spectrum. And I think there's some people that are very deeply on that side of it. And music is just another component of the way they do art.
Sure.
And I think that's how I feel about it when I think about her.
And it can be very collaborative, you know, because I think sometimes maybe if you're like a painter or if you're a sculptor, it can be weird to be collaborative. But with music, it's always easy to be like, hey, can you contribute to this? And they, especially when you have an idea about something and someone else adds something to it and you're like, whoa, never even thought about that. Mm-hmm. I think that's especially fertile ground for artists.
Fertile ground
Yeah.
takes us to the Garden of Eden.
Okay.
Which is, so this next track is called Closed Circuits for Voice and Amplified Mic Stands.
So are we on a new record? What's happening
Nope,
here?
we're still in the 4.5
Remember,
hours.
this is a 4.5 hour
4.5
record. I think
hours.
we're going to have some songs off of it.
Okay.
But we're going to kind of move through these
Yeah.
next
We're
ones.
going to
you
be
can-
heaviest on this record.
Okay.
And then not as many.
Very good.
We'll just let this one roll.
All right.
'Cause I saw you were crying, baby. You were crying in your sleep. You're the snake charm, baby. And you're also a very long snake. You're a closed circuit, baby. You've got the answers in the palms of your hands.
Yeah.
So before we talk about content on that one, she is sitting between two mic stands that she is playing as the percussion. So
Okay.
moving up and down the mic stands
Okay.
as she's talking about, you know, long snakes in your hands. That's the percussion that you hear going
Gotcha.
on.
All right. Yeah, so you
Which is-
have to be ready for this kind of thing.
Well,
a
it's just
little
funny
bit.
to me because when I first started playing music, you just gave me a musical Laurie Anderson memory that I didn't really connect until just now, is when I started using mics to sing, which was very normal. But then I remember when we started using flange and like different effects. And I remember We have this whole song I made with a friend of mine, Jeremy, where we were just beating the microphones because it made all these loopy, crazy things happen. And we were like, oh, I like that. And we didn't use any instrumentation besides that and just loved it. So there's all kinds of like ways you find those kinds of little nuggets. And I totally get the tapping of the mic stand. It really is, it can be another instrument.
I took it off the list, but there's a song on this 4.5 hours where she has a microphone in these sunglasses and she just pounds on her head to the rhythm, and the song's called Reverb.
And we had a lot of reverb on it as well because it does a gatey like thing.
And chomps her teeth, and it makes different noises. Later on, she would take drum machines apart and put the pads on her body and dance and pound on her
I like that.
knee or breast in these intense ways that's making the rhythm. And so it's pretty cool.
So I've been a Laurie Anderson fan my whole life without even knowing it.
I think you are, because Bryan, and I'm sure you know this to a point, Andy, but maybe our audience doesn't know this. Bryan is a big audiophile. Like, he really likes sound, and he likes the way that engineering and with sound works. And you're very curious about all types of filters and all the ways that those things work. You're very curious about it. So this is definitely something, even though musically you might not have always connected with, I think you would connect with the innovation and the experimentation that she's doing.
Well, it's certainly like what that made me think of is when you plug a microphone or something into some kind of filter device and you start going through all the settings and you hit that one and you're like, oh, my voice sounds crazy. And you start saying a bunch of dumb things because you want to hear what it sounds like. So that's that kind of thing. And again, like what you're saying, what you were saying earlier about like, oh, it gave me permission to make songs that were 30 seconds long. Like, you're like, okay, you can just be a weirdo artist and do these things.
Right.
So
and that was partly why, I was just excited to look at, because when I was first listening to her, I was not aware of any of the technical aspects. I was listening to the stories.
Okay.
And so I saw your eyes light up in that one where she hits the K sound at the end, and then it just starts looping forward, and then she's talking to the loop of her sound. Now, however she's doing that is beyond me, but that kind of stuff for me was going on in the background, and listening to all this again now, 10 years, 30 years later, it's something new that I appreciate about what it probably took to get all this
especially
going.
Then.
Right.
Like now you can do anything easy.
But most of this was obviously analog at that point. It's just, and a lot of it was not synthesizer driven. A lot of it was taking these things and pounding on them.
Taking stuff apart and gluing it back together,
which
in your own way.
She still says she loves to do.
That's fantastic.
So
love it.
This next one, and these are just a couple, just to give you a little more flavor of some of the intensity of the instrumentals. This is called We've Got 4 Big Clocks and They're All Ticking.
We've got 4 big clocks and they're all ticking.
So this immediately makes me think like what a person like Miles Davis may have thought of.
I was hoping you were thinking jazz.
of Laurie Anderson. He must have been down, because if she's doing that kind of stuff, because I know he was trying to get into that later in his life.
Well, and his wife too, and her experimentation. I mean, definitely.
That's definitely the avant-garde jazz scene for sure.
Lou Reed, her future husband, was a huge Ornette Coleman fan.
Ah, okay.
And she used a lot of saxophone sounds, especially in the 80s. John Zorn was a big collaborator musically with her. But yeah, there's a lot of saxophone on these 4.5 hours. So you also sometimes duet saxophone, you have to be ready for that too.
Yeah. And I'm sure all very electrified and affected by various things.
Yeah.
Or straight ahead. Either way.
This next one is the song that I sampled.
Okay.
And I think this is the song in its entirety. I think this is 30-some seconds. It's called If You Can't Talk About It, Point to It for Ludwig Wittgenstein and Reverend Ike.
So this was a Lost Gospel sample? This is what you're telling me?
I did play a song. Yeah, there's a song called Liz Fair on our second record that I just play it over that.
Okay.
And Andy, as a side, can you get Lost Gospel stuff on YouTube Music and other places if people want to hear your
If
band?
not, we're going to make it. We got to put it up there.
We'll link it so
Yeah,
you can check that out if you'd
We
like.
got to put it up there.
And so, yeah, that is obviously you just, transitioning into some other musical number or other storytelling number, just plopped it down in there.
Yeah.
So, this last one's called Going Somewhere.
Okay.
Going somewhere?
So that's funny because I thought that's great. That was a great little surprise there because I thought it was like driving, like you're driving down the road, but it's like, oh no.
And I think it comes in at the end toward the end of United States Part 4.
Okay.
So if you went to all 4 nights of it, you would have been like toward 8 hours of this. And so going somewhere, reasonable question.
You're assuming
for
the
audience.
original was 2 hours per night for 4 nights?
Yes, I believe that's how they did it.
I was going to ask you that question.
Gracious. That's commitment.
But so musically, what does that trigger for either of you? That kind of...
Nothing immediately is triggering for me.
It triggers some memories because I've seen some of that live. I didn't listen to this one as much, but when I saw the Nerve Bible later on, it was a retrospective of 20 years of her career. So you saw a lot of these little snippets of these things. It was amazing. And it's something that Andy also saw, I think, right? It was in 1996, I think?
I think it was a little earlier.
It came with a book as well.
90s.
Do you have that book, I imagine?
Yep. It's hidden away so Bryan wouldn't see it.
But that was, yeah.
I mean, and so you'll hear things later that are very melodic. And part of why I just wanted to throw that in there is that there is, a real intensity to it, even though there aren't loud, distorted guitars. I think she was doing some fairly aggressive, intense.
I agree. I think it was industrial even, it sounds like some of the things that she was doing.
On Apple Music, I think it even calls her this punk, which you're going to hear things, it's categorized as punk. You're going to hear things relatively soon this morning that you're not going to think sound punk.
Okay.
But that just, for me, characterizes some of the experimentation and intensity of what she was doing.
I completely agree with you. And I'd like hearing that more because, like I said, I've really heard the records after that more. It was very interesting to hear, and I really love how much experimentation was going on and like just unbridled.
Yep.
And I think we mentioned at the top of this podcast that when Oh, Superman in this limited release came out,
Okay.
it attracted Warner Brothers because she had asked them how she could put this out. And they said, well, how about we put out 7 records? So she signed to put this record out. And this record is called Big Science, and it came out in 1982.
Okay.
And I think it's about time you heard Oh, Superman.
Let's
You
do
ready?
it.
Let's go.
So this is the hit that John Peel put on
Championed.
repeat.
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
Oh, Superman.
mom and dad. Mom and dad. Oh, Superman.
What are you thinking so far? We're going to go back up a little further in this song so you can hear a little more with other instruments coming in. But what do you think so far?
It's pretty incredible. I mean,
And-
you know.
Guess what doesn't stop happening for 8 minutes?
Oh, Superman.
No, the
Oh, the parts.
Let's
yeah.
go a little bit further in.
Okay.
No blue night shall stay these couriers from the swift completion of their appointed round.
That's pretty sweet.
I wanted you to hear that 'cause Bryan loves space music.
I
and
do
feel
like space music.
Not that that's space music, but
It's
it
space
does
music-esque.
remind me a little bit of,
Esque.
and very flip glass, that like the way that the horns are coming in. I'm wondering if there was any collaboration. I don't know if there was at that time. Was there?
They were definitely friends in the 70s. I don't think he was specifically a part of this, but I will say, because we might not get to it, that she was the only ever NASA artist in residence.
Come on.
Makes total sense.
Much
awesome.
decades later, and it apparently, I don't know much about this, but it got controversial that NASA had an artist in residence.
Really?
But yeah, so speaking of, and she did some moon-related projects musically.
Fantastic.
I'm saying this is definitely up your alley. You just needed to hear it.
One,
so.
I wonder, I imagine her and Eno probably had
That
some
might come in a
conversation.
little later. We're not going to talk about it. I mean, it's sneaky. You don't know when it's going to happen.
You don't know, but
But it would be strange.
so the vocoder.
Yeah.
Do you know much about the vocoder? I think that's
Well, it's funny you should mention it. We just
Yeah.
watched on Netflix. They have. I mean, I knew about vocoders, as much as basement basement knowledge of it because I never used one. But we watched this thing on pop music that was on Netflix, and they had one episode about the vocoder and basically how what's his name?
T-Pain.
T-Pain. Basically, how his whole career was marred by the fact that he used the vocoder, and
let me
people
stop you
said he
there.
destroyed music.
It wasn't the
Yes.
vocoder that he was using.
He was using pitch,
auto
but he was also using the.
tune.
But they were
It's auto
talking.
tune.
But they were also talking about the vocoder within the episode,
Right,
Because he was taking it
listened to
70s soul,
funk and soul,
that he
and
heard in.
trying to figure out what they were doing, and then he discovered auto tune in that process, and then proceeded to ruin music,
Yes.
according to Kanye or somebody like that.
Usher.
So I guess my question about this song, it's so familiar to me. Hearing it, can you imagine how this could become a smash pop hit, especially knowing that it's 8 minutes
It's 8
long?
minutes and 25 seconds.
Yeah, no, I cannot.
Well,
Other
the
than
Brits
just
have
those
better.
Brits.
They have better ears. I'm just telling you. If you're out there, UK, we love you, and you listen to music way better than us.
That's. Thank you, UK. No, I can't. I honestly cannot. And that somebody would have, other than you are just used to having that kind of stuff on the radio, and there's a place to go for it. Like here we'd have college radio, so of course or like community radio, you'd expect to hear something wacky, but otherwise, yeah, not like mainstream radio.
Yeah, and it's, I think that when you put it kind of in the context of Michael Jackson, put in the time frame of
82.
Thriller,
Yeah.
it's still, and I think that's partly why I've listened to, a couple interviews with her, and the interviewer always mentions that. That's the one fact. Oh, Superman becoming number 2 in the UK is the one fact as kind of an introduction to how did she become somebody who was famous or then moved into this whole next phase of her career, was the kind of happy accident of this song becoming really famous.
Super cool.
So let's play some more off of Big Science. This song you heard at the beginning from the United States Live.
Okay.
But it's a little different this way. So this is example number 22.
Beispiele paranormale Tonbandstimmen. Was sind paranormale Tonbandstimmen? Es sind Stimmen unbekannter Herkunft. Es sind paranormale Tonbandstimmen.
Ihren Klang. Ich verstehe die Sprachen. Ich verstehe die Sprachen nicht. Ich höre nur ihren Klang.
Honey, you're my one and only. So pay me what you owe me.
Yes, this is art music, ladies and gentlemen. This is art music.
Well, not just that, but yes.
But it's good. I mean, I don't say that in a derogatory way whatsoever.
I know. But you'll see it'll change in everything. I think actually the next song, which I was gonna talk a little bit. I think I want to play it because you said that, because I want you to hear that I do agree with you, and I think that's what's great too. Like I like that it's not traditional songwriting.
Yeah.
But it does experiment with that as well. So let's hear this one, and I have heart next to this one. I didn't put a sticker,
goodness!
But I love
this is the
song.
first heart of the road.
I know.
On the road,
I totally
Melissa.
forgot yesterday when we were doing our
system.
podcast. I totally forgot my heart system. Although I think there would have been, yeah.
I put a double heart on the next one.
Oh, good.
Their hearts are coming out.
Okay. Oh, on the next section of it, or that one?
It Tango.
Oh, good. Thank you. So this one's called It Tango. Ready?
She said, it looks, don't you think it looks a lot like rain? He said, isn't it? Isn't it just? Isn't it just like a woman? She said, it's hard. It's just hard. It's just kind of hard to say. He said, isn't it? Isn't it just? Isn't it just like a woman?
Sweet.
What do you think of that one, Bryan?
I like it.
This is also my heart.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I kind of have another section of it I'd like to play as well because I like it so much. And I think I tried to research this to figure this out because I heard this record before I had seen this film, but I'm pretty sure that this song is featured in a Hal Hartley movie. I can almost bet a lot of money on it. And that's not the first time I heard it. I heard it before the Hal Hartley movie that I liked, who's a director that I'm a little bit obsessed with that I mention all the time. If you haven't heard of him,
he's great. Can I say one little thing before?
Please.
One of the things that I love about this song is not just the way that it is about gender and communication, but it's also how she takes the phrase and she gives you a little bit of the phrase, and then she gives you a little more of the phrase, then she gives you a little bit more, and then she gives you the whole phrase. And that was true with the Burroughs violin piece. You're hearing this. Well, if you don't get the whole story, you don't understand what's being said. So these themes of like miscommunication
Context
between people. But this is great because some of these little phrases, it means something different when you hear the little bit. And then when you hear the whole thing, it means something else. And so it's just a way of kind of cutting up the language that just was pretty neat.
Yeah,
for me.
No, definitely. And that's what I mean by like art music is it's making you think a little bit and just manipulating things in an interesting way. So it's not just there for entertainment purposes.
But also can be.
Okay.
So this is a little bit more of It Tango.
She said, it takes one. It takes one too. Takes one to know one. He said, isn't it just like a woman? She said it. She said it to know. She said it to no one.
I mean, that almost sounds like lines from a movie, something. Maybe. perhaps.
You mean like that? Like it feels theatrical to you? Or
No,
what do you
like
mean?
the words she is saying is from a script of a movie. She said it takes one to know one, and he said it's just like a woman. Something like that. Like somebody telling a story or something.
Right. I mean, it's very much. I think a lot of her work is about taking normal moments in conversation and kind of breaking them apart and challenging, just challenging notions about how we talk and how we relate and how, and that's, and so it's not these, even though it is quote artistic, it's there, it is taking kind of, to me, simple building blocks of conversation and speech, whether that's stuff about, money, language, cars, and just turning that into something that's popular, in quotes again, entertainment.
Yeah.
So that was, I have more songs on the mix from Big Science, and I definitely encourage people to listen to the mixes. I always say, listen to whole records. If you are interested in any of these, please, sit down for 4.5 hours and take it in, because it's worth it. But maybe in parts, you don't have to do it all at once, and not all of them are that long. But like, I do think that works are meant to be listened to in their entirety as much as you can. So, yeah.
For me, it's far and away the great place to start.
Yeah.
And you've pulled out the actual prop here, Andy, for us. So it's been re-released.
It has been re-released.
Big Science
on vinyl just this year.
Okay.
And so that
Get
is with just super fun photographs. So our next destination, is an album from 1984.
Okay.
Called Mr. Heartbreak.
Okay.
And this is also a Warner Brothers release, and I remember this record seeming very smooth. I will say that this was not my favorite thing to listen to of her catalog, and so I was excited to grab this one and spend more time with it, getting ready for the show. And I think it's a good, let's just jump into track one, this is called Sharky's Day.
Okay.
Sun's coming up like a big bald head bulging up over the grocery store. It's Sharky's Day. It's Sharky's Day today. Sharky wakes up and Sharky says...
So I'll say we're going to listen to a little more of that, but this is the first track on that record. So the kind of good morning, here comes the sun part is definitely there. But the first thing, did anything jump out to you hearing that?
Well, I mean, there's lots of little tinkles and tangles going on there, and I like that.
The noise is great.
So, and when I listened to it, also, I didn't remember that harsh guitar.
That's what I'm talking about.
That kind of, and that's so, and there's a lot of that on this record. That's Adrian Belew, who was apparently the potential David Byrne replacement when they tried to coup the Talking Heads, like to replace David Byrne, Tina. He played with them, but he was also the guy that I think Tina and Chris from the Talking Heads wanted in there to replace David Byrne.
Oh, dang.
That's the rumor.
Oh, wow.
But so anyway, so he is also a big Laurie collaborator at that point and plays a lot of guitar on this record. We can hear some more of this one, but...
Sharky says, all night long I think of those little planes up there flying around, you can't even see them, they're specks, and they're full of tiny people going places, and Sharky says, I bet they could all land on the head of a pin.
like that part. Mm-hmm. Some Moroccan drums going on there.
Pretty much all I remembered about this song was the sun's coming up, it's a big bald head, and that W part. And so this is I think also 7 minutes long.
This one is 7:47.
Yeah, this is so your first track on your next big Warner Brothers release is, and there's anyway, I'm more a fan of this song than I was before
previously,
being a closer listener.
All right.
Well, that's good. When you hear another, you had the little part
another little
at the
bit.
End.
Yep.
Last
little end part.
Check it out.
Deep in the heart of darkest America, on the brain, you've already paid for this. Listen to my heartbeat.
So that's more of that Adrian Blue.
I love that
popping in there.
Yeah,
I do. But I'm a big fan of that kind of thing, so I need to revisit that.
And I keep cutting it off before the chorus starts to sing "Ooey, Sharky, Mr. Heartbreak," and so that's going on throughout the whole thing. I just kind of threw that in there because it's the "Listen to My Heartbeat" segue again, because the next one is the last track on this record, which is called Sharky's Night.
Okay.
Sharky is this mythical kind of everyman character, apparently, on this record. And it turns out that William Burroughs is back.
Okay.
So the voice that you will hear on Sharky's Night is Mr. Burroughs.
Okay.
Sun's going down like a big bald head, disappearing behind the boulevard. It's Sharky's night. Yeah. It's Sharky's night tonight.
So this is another one of those moments where I'm like, how did I not know about this or listen to this? Because I was definitely listening to Burroughs in my, Jack Kerouac, Allen Ginsberg phase that I think many, people go through. So listening to, I can remember listening to records of his. And again, it was my brother, introducing it to me, and also through jazz music and things like that.
I would love, Oliver and I have been talking a little about the beat concept, because he was slightly familiar, but would you be willing to rank those three men you just mentioned in order of how much you were inspired by them or listened to them?
So Kerouac was the first, in terms of listening to him and reading the books. And then I think Burroughs kind of followed more closely. Ginsberg obviously knew the whatever the name of his big famous poem, that I can't think of right now. The Howl. Okay, that one.
Good one. Yep.
I would, but I think Burroughs came in more stronger because there was more of a connection at that time. I think he was still releasing stuff. Obviously, Kerouac's way dead, and Ginsberg was there. But I think when I was working at the college radio station, there was still stuff coming out from him. Yep. That would come to the station.
And Naked Lunch was one of my favorite films of the year when it came out. So we had such a resurgence and interest in Kerouac.
Yeah.
Not Kerouac, excuse me, Burroughs, that it made it just insane.
What I was also interested about was realizing how little in my life, it was Ginsberg. Mm-hmm. And then the other two were just almost too much in our household. It was interesting realizing how much Burroughs and Laurie Anderson collaborated, because I also heard in an interview people asking, well, tell us about Burroughs, and she would say, well, there were kind of two big problems. One was he hated women, and the other was he loved guns. And so part of it was the punchline then was, but he made me laugh. And so she worked with him because, both at that point he was, going out in the back of the, concert hall in the parking lot and doing target practice before the show, but also an icon. And so at that point, I get it that you would work with an icon even if you had a complicated relationship with some of their
certainly
attitudes, thoughts,
content.
Yeah,
if you're
content.
doing challenging work in general, you're going to get somebody like that who's like going to not just come in and phone it in for you. They're going to like push right back and be like, all right, I'll do this for you.
Not a phone it in guy.
Yeah.
Do you want to hear the later part of that?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's good to.
Let's listen to a little bit more of Sharky's Night.
Pictures of myself, and there's one in each of your eyes. And they're doing everything I do. Every time I light a cigarette, they light up there. I take a drink, and I look again, and they're drinking too. It's driving me crazy. It's driving me nuts.
Yeah, gonna have to listen to that.
There's
Have to
Bill.
check that out.
It's a good one. So the next track goes back to that Serpent in the Garden theme.
Okay.
Which one of the things that there's a lot of throughout her storytelling is reinterpreting fairy tales, nursery rhymes, Bible stories, and this is a track that is also Garden of Eden oriented.
All right.
So,
And the name of it?
Langue d'amour.
Perfect.
Let's see. It was on an island. And there was a snake. And the snake had legs. And he could walk all around the island. Yes, that's true. A snake with legs. And the man and the woman were on the island too. And they were not very smart. But they were happy as clowns.
It's so funny watching Andy during these songs because he knows them so well. He's actually mouthing the lyrics to them. That's amazing.
Well, it's only because so a lot of these appear on multiple versions of things. So just getting ready for I haven't listened to her music for probably a decade until these last 2 weeks, and so there really is a kind of reconnection that's awesome. This song particular was another one that both the gender parts that are about to come in the rest of the song and also the retelling of the story. To me, this is just masterful, awesome stuff. So it goes on, but this is another little section.
Okay.
And the woman liked the snake very much, because when he talked, he made little noises with his tongue, and his long tongue was lightly licking about his lips, like there was a little fire inside his mouth, and the flame would come dancing out of his mouth. And the woman liked this very much. And after that...
Goodness gracious. Dirty.
It's funny, you won't pick out a lot of things in there because you'll find that.
It's pretty obvious. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Yeah, she performs this. She performs this wearing a very kind of sparkly long gown with black long gloves, pretending to be the serpent talking to her and tempting her. It's just good stuff.
Okay.
And that takes us to our last collaboration on this record, which is turns out to be with someone who was super famous at the time. Named Peter Gabriel.
Oh. And this is, Melissa, this is kind of your entry point here to Miss Anderson.
Yes.
Okay.
So this song is called Excellent Birds, and it is probably by far my least favorite of her songs.
It's just a gateway. It doesn't necessarily mean it's where you stay.
Okay.
Gateway.
Well, we'll give it a listen.
Okay. Excellent Birds.
Flying birds, excellent birds. Watch them fly. Falling snow.
Yes, that's very Peter Gabriel.
But I think also, like, how huge of a Peter Gabriel fan were you?
So the answer is just what I would have seen on MTV.
Yeah, I was like, you will be hearing from me at some point on this podcast talking about him. I was a huge Peter Gabriel fan, like ginormous. So I've seen him many times. So like, even though this isn't one of my favorite songs of his, and so isn't actually one of my favorite collections, really, it still was interesting to me. And I was like, who is this person?
Who is
Whoever,
this?
just like
Right.
you would say, whoever's collaborating with him, I'd be like, who are you?
Who's that?
Like, how is this happening? Like, I had heard Kate Bush before. I'd heard her sing with Peter Gabriel, but I didn't make the connection until Peter Gabriel was like, hey, Melissa, look again.
Yeah.
There's this
there's
person
somebody.
over here you need to pay attention to. And that's what always would happen with me with Peter Gabriel. It was he introduced me to world music. It was just a lot of things. He was my Paul Simon in that way. Like, he introduced me to a whole big world of interesting sound and recording and Ravi Shankar, like all this stuff that I didn't know about. It was like, it was amazing.
I just imagine him showing up with this Peter Gabriel suitcase of like, sounds and keyboards and things like, this is how this is going to sound. Ready?
I can't even imagine those two
okay.
together, to be honest, because they both are just so innovative. Like, I would just love to hear them talk.
So it sounds like this all happened over the course of 2 days.
Okay.
So unlike a lot of these other tracks that were part of her show going back 6 or 7 years, they wrote this together.
Yes.
Okay.
And made a video right afterwards together. And I forget the word so there's a version of the song on her record and there's a version of the song on his record that are different.
Okay.
Because there was apparently a standoff, in quotes, about the bass end.
Okay.
So for you audiophiles out there, you can listen and try and figure
And
out.
imagine that Peter Gabriel's bass end is a lot deeper. Because it usually is.
About the instrumentation.
Yes,
and
Very.
so she says something along the lines of, I like the higher stuff, and I just kind of trusted him to handle that, and that he was a magician about the bass end of things. To me, it is one. I guess there's. Let's listen to a little more.
Okay.
Of that
There's a little
one.
bit more
This-
of
yeah, a
Excellent
little
Birds.
more of Excellent Birds.
Moving, I'm turning in time. Jump up, and I can land on my feet. Look out! This is the picture. This is the picture. This is the picture. This is the picture.
So
yeah,
that,
I'm going to
like-
say way deeper on the Peter Gabriel version, but I like that version too. I can see why you wouldn't maybe want it to be so,
So this obviously this is the Laurie Anderson version.
Both versions are on the mix.
Okay.
So when you
Very
need
good.
to listen,
You can compare and contrast.
You compare and contrast.
Very good.
But thank you for including that, even though I know it's not probably your favorite, because yeah, it really was my entryway into
Yeah.
all of that. So
Yeah, and I did not
appreciate
know
it.
that.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it's no, and that was partly. It was just interesting that I remember not enjoying it, but also then why? And I think it was that a lot of the lyrics seemed not as kind of well processed, edited, or deep to me. It was something that, and then to learn 30 years later that it was kind of made up on the spot.
Pretty off the cuff.
It's great.
Yeah,
So it's all good.
That makes sense. And then after that, the record Strange Angels came out. But it took over a year before it got released, before it was recorded, because she took voice lessons.
Okay.
Because this is going to be, of everything you've heard so far, I don't want to use the term more musical, because I think the other records are musical, but more standard, traditional, what you would expect, but still not
Song structure.
Melody.
stuff.
melody.
Melody.
Like more melodic.
Okay.
I don't really necessarily know if she wanted to prove that, or if the record label was pushing, or if she was experimenting in that way. I know that my feelings about this record at the time, I really enjoyed it when I was younger, because that was before I'd gotten into I also heard this record before I heard Big Science. Yeah. And once I heard Big Science, I liked that more.
Okay.
But I had this on cassette, and I was like, this is cool. I like it. I was really into Enya at the time, so this was like right up my alley, because you're going to hear it's a lot more singing than you're used to hearing from her.
Yeah, so far not a lot of singing.
So let's start off with Coolsville so you can hear what I'm talking about.
Coolsville.
exactly why you would like this.
But I was like, and I'm going to mention a few people that you might not know, but other people might know. I was in a super Jane Siberry phase.
Okay.
Like heavily. She's a Canadian recording artist that I love that also will be telling you that at some point. I have many of her records.
Okay.
Which would explain
I think I learned
Andy
about her
knows.
because of Laurie.
Yeah.
Okay.
And like they're especially this record, it's very kindred. And I was definitely hugely into Susan Vega. And yeah. So it kind of makes sense to me that so this record, I have to say, I probably listened to the most, which I'm kind of embarrassed by in my cool points to say, but
me too.
Yeah, it's just the one I loved.
Well, and this was the one that was most recent when I was in college.
89.
So,
This is 1989.
Yeah. So at the point that we were watching that film and blah, 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 this was the album that was most handy.
Okay.
And so this was, for me, by far the one that I listened to most as well. And, I have favorite moments. And what I love is that I think most of my favorite moments are not the ones that you've chosen, which is super exciting too, because I purposely didn't listen to this record.
Oh, because it's like just speaks to us when I did it. Oh, that's good.
No, just to get ready for the show and just react. So anyway.
So you had it on tape.
Well, I feel bad.
Did you have it on tape, Andy?
No, I would have this on disc.
You had it on the disc.
I had this on a CD.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yep.
Listen to another song. This one's
do
called
it.
Raymond.
Last night I saw a host of angels, and they were all singing different songs, and it sounded like a lot of lawnmowers mowing down my lawn, and up above Virgilians and stars spangled all over my sky.
I like that chorus.
I love that song. I didn't know that was what it was called. So this is a
might be
memory challenge,
Okay.
but I love that song.
Okay, good. So does that sounding very different to you than the other
A
record?
bazillion
Yeah.
percent,
Yeah.
because she's singing and all the other things. There's a lot of spoken word, I would say.
I also think she's proving she can sing.
Absolutely.
She
Yeah.
definitely can. And I also, as I've mentioned many times in this podcast, I was a classically trained singer back when I was younger.
Mhm.
So I, of course, love when I'm like, oh, someone's doing stuff that makes sense to me, kind of in a way.
Yeah.
And I still liked, though, on the records before, when I played Big Science, when she was kind of straining and singing. I love that, too. Like, I don't necessarily have to be in one
You do like
camp.
that. You always like the
I
cracky
do.
singing, too,
I
don't
do.
you?
So it's not, I'm not like, so I just want to put that out there that I am not, like a snob about voices. I actually like unique sounding voices is always my favorite number one thing about someone's voice. But then, were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say too, one of the things that I love is the comparison of the sound of angels to lawnmowers. And so even in a song that sounds well produced and comfortable to listen to, the fact that there is also language in it that just kind of gets your attention is a way that this record throughout does. Even though it sounds smoother, it's also can put you on your heels some, and you have to, stuff does jump out.
Yeah, it's not all going to be like that. But this song actually is a little different. We'll play it. It's The Day the Devil.
The day the devil comes to get ya, you know him by the way he smiles. The day the devil comes to get ya, he's a rusty truck with only 20 miles. He's got bad blood, he's got
And some of that bass in there.
Yeah.
That's a good one for the Halloween mix.
Yeah,
We need to add that one.
No doubt.
Yeah.
So can you tell if that is drum pads or, maybe you were
that's a good
listening for
question.
that?
I think so. Yeah,
I think it probably is.
That's not drums. That's definitely not traditional
That would
drums.
have to be highly affected acoustic drums for sure.
And also
So
the
I've
way
heard
that,
this-
that happens the way when it hits. That's exactly how that will usually sound when it hits.
And that could very well be some MIDI going on there as well.
I would think so. I think those are MIDI controlled drums.
Programmed drums, yes, would be my guess.
Gotcha. And I think, I remember this song in the way that she starts to have these gospel elements too, which I think were fairly common in American music, maybe post Rattle and Hum, in the sense that there was, everybody kind of has their go down by the river, gospel tinged Americana-ish track that also has some spooky kind of devil gonna get you stuff. I don't know. That was my impression of this song, was that it had some of those more American elements.
I also felt like it was and like when you said that, Eurythmics point kind of jumps out to me in that kind of like she would get very in this like very serious kind of way. I just picked it because it's not my favorite song on the record, but I wanted to give you different things that were happening. It's not all just going to be melodic things. And I think that one's a good mix of her spoken word stuff and singing in that record. And she doesn't do that as much on this. So I just wanted to play a little bit of it.
Okay.
And then lastly, can you help me pronounce this word? I'm not going to say it right.
Hiawatha.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hiawatha. This is a beautiful one.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's true.
By the shining big sea water, downward through evening twilight, in the days that are forgotten, round along the sky blue water. And I said, hello, operator, get me memory.
That is quite lovely. That's nice singing.
The vocals were kind of, the end of the vocals there, I think, were kind of panning. It was kind of a
little
neat
back
thing
and
with
forth.
headphones.
It's the
back
great
and
thing
forth.
about doing, we do this sometimes is that, like, my favorite part about doing this podcast is, I keep saying it to people because we're visiting people, but I don't think I've said it on it, which is you're just going to people's houses and listening to music for like 2 hours and talking about it.
Yeah.
When do you really get to do that?
Right.
Like, I don't know, like, it'd be great if people are listening, but even if you're not, like, it's just fun for us to do that. And so thank you for getting, and I think that when other people, we do with other people, they also get this recognition of like, this realization that they're like, wait, we're sitting around talking about music and actually listening to it for 2 hours. Like,
Yeah.
it's
No,
so
it's
much
neat.
fun. Like, I think like, I'm just going to, even if I don't ever release them anymore, I'm just going to keep doing that.
Right.
Like,
Just for
it's
fun.
just so much fun.
Absolutely. I think that track, and this may have been partly what I was talking about before, goes on to an Elvis name checks JFK maybe. There's there was definitely some more of that kind of Mississippi Delta, Elvis by the river kind of stuff going on. I'm not sure. But I do love that one. It's a good one.
Yeah. So yeah, that was Andy and I's most listened to record.
Okay.
And
All
I will
right.
say before we leave it, there's a lot of very poppy songs on this record.
Okay.
Bobby McFerrin appears doing
Don't Worry, Be
pop-
Happy?
He does some awesome different vocals in different songs.
Okay.
And I think there are some very catchy pop songs.
What's the name of the
on here,
record
too.
again, so I will not remember it?
Strange Angels.
Thank you.
And we can put more of those on the mix too, Andy. You can add some more to it as well, because we always have more songs on the mix than we play.
That is right.
So
dun,
dun, dun.
where are we now?
We are in 1994.
Okay.
And I will tell you, actually, let's not tell you. This album is called Bright Red. And between Laurie Anderson met Lou Reed.
Okay.
Between the last record and this one.
All right.
And they began a 2 decades at least long relationship that also included marriage. So I will say right out of the gates, this first track is a duet between Lou and Laurie.
All right.
In our sleep, as we speak, listen to the drums beat as we speak. In our sleep, as we speak, listen to the drums beat in our sleep.
All right.
And so at that point in life, I was a huge fan of the Velvets and Lou, and a huge fan of Laurie Anderson, and would have never in a million years imagined the two of them becoming a musical or romantic connection. And it greatly increased my respect for Lou.
Okay.
Yes, it did help. I'm with you. If
that tells you kind of where I was with my respect for Lou at that point.
Okay.
But, and so there's another section of this song that might give the next clue away, but here you go.
As we speak, listen to the drums beat. As we speak, in our sleep, listen to the drums beat. In our sleep, as we speak, listen to the drums beat. As we speak, in our sleep, as we speak.
So, collaborator, enter stage right. There's a question there. There's a collaborator involved here.
Okay.
Guess who?
I'm going to guess it's, Sneakings.
You're correct.
And I don't know what it was about it, but I think it's just a subconscious thing, much like guessing that this was Laurie, because I was like pondering that for me, like, how did I guess that it was Laurie Anderson?
Well, I
and
think it might be that Andy
know.
said on our podcast in a recorded thing about what people he thinks we should already tell people that, and I think I pointed that out to you. I did give you that hint.
It's all right. No,
I just gave it to Bryan the other day. So
right, and it's not like I had that list memorized, but so just like Sneaky Eno, it being sneaky like he is stuck somewhere in my subconscious, and it made sense. I was like, oh, I bet this is where Eno comes into play.
For me, that kind of slide up. There's a lot of sliding on this record. Like revving it up.
And the way the drums are recorded sounds very much like something.
Because I think that's also happening in U2, maybe around this time period.
And Passengers has
Speaking of their Americana, didn't they did their rattle and hum situation?
And to me, it's that bouncy part of the drums. That there was a period when Eno was producing people. There's a John Cale, Bryan Eno record where it's just very kind of bouncy. That
bouncy drum situation.
Like I said, that's when the Passengers was happening, 1994.
Okay.
With U2 and him making their own record together.
Okay.
And their drums sound very much like that does.
This record, like I probably put that song on 1,000 cassette tape mixes.
Okay.
That's a good one.
I think about this record very much as the coming together of Lou and Laurie, but then Eno plays on he's playing keyboards and drum treatments, air quotes, on every track, and wrote some of these songs with her. So coming back to this in the last week, it was also like, oh my gosh, he is all over this. He is all over this album. Before we play the next two, this is just such a random fact that in the early 90s, Eno, Peter Gabriel, and Laurie Anderson were planning. Did you know? Planning an amusement park.
Yes, I do know this.
In Barcelona.
Yes.
Kind of bringing all these gentlemen and together with Laurie. It was going to be called The Real World.
No, because that's based on what the real world is, right? Just before you get into that, because it isn't part of it. So Real World Studios is where Peter Gabriel records, and it's state of the art. And he has a label also called Real World.
And so isn't there like a rainforest inside of it or something?
Crazy rooms of insane things. And Bryan Eno and Laurie Anderson were very, I'm sure, involved or knew about it. Like, of course. So it was an extension of that. I think there was supposed to be a theme park, but go on.
Like how big of a theme park? Like roller coasters and
stuff? I only know
about
the studio, and I knew there was plans, but I didn't.
And I only know that it was supposed to be on the site where they played the tennis events in the 92 Olympics in Barcelona. So it was going to be part of a park.
Oh, wow.
And, I think it was going to be more of an experience.
During the Olympics, somebody could go and see this. Oh, okay, after.
Yeah. But it was maybe less about rides and more about space, sound, visuals.
Gotcha.
More of an art experience.
Sure.
And he did do it, but as a studio.
Okay, so
Basically.
it never fully came to fruition as a experience that you could go and enjoy.
It never did, unfortunately.
That's unfortunate.
The next track from this one is called World Without End.
Okay.
When my father died, it was like a whole library burned down. World without end. Remember me.
This is interesting because two things. One, definite feel the Enos in there. That guitar and that like spaciness in the background is very much from that. The one Eno record that I know of about the moon stuff.
Apollo.
Yep.
And then World Without End is in a Catholic prayer. It's a Catholic thing. There's a prayer where you say World Without End at the end of it. And there's like a bunch of things that you repeat over and over and over again. Then you say World Without End. I don't know if there's any connection for her. But I may be completely wrong. But it just immediately clicked into me as like, oh, that's something we would repeat a bunch at church.
And partly for me, that piece of when my father died, it was like a library burned to the ground is one of the lines that has just come back to me over the years. Just that sense that a life lived, but also all of the things that a person knows and experiences, that's really their... I mean, this record is, for me, a lot about, listening to it again, about memory, about stories, and about how those things relate to each other, and trying to do it in a way that's not like, hey, I'm telling you about memory and stories. And I think it's just neat that way. And it also repeats. So this next track is called Tightrope. The first bit, just to give a little setup, is about a dream where she's at an amusement park, and in this dream, you're about to hear what's happening to her ex-boyfriends.
And there was this big Ferris wheel, about half a mile out in the ocean, half in and half out of the water. And all my old boyfriends were on it, with their new girlfriends. And the boys were waving and shouting. And the girls were saying, eek.
So she's just planning the theme park.
Exactly.
She's starting the planning for the theme park.
No, maybe Eno was on the out there in the carousel, half drowned, half breathing.
Did she date him?
No.
I was like, what?
No. But no. One of the things that before we played another little bit of that song, when I kind of looked and thought about all the men that she collaborated with, like, it's an incredible list. And they're just, unfortunately, and that was probably about popular music, there were not as many women who she collaborated with. When you look at, collaborating with Lou and Peter Gabriel and Burroughs and Mapplethorpe and,
I mean, I think that's sexism. I mean, there would be more women doing what she's doing. It's already weird enough and hard enough to be doing what she's doing. Just you take even gender out of it, like to make a career being an avant-garde artist and doing that is very difficult. But then taking, the 70s, 80s, 90s, and also encouragement that people would get and not get. And I just think that there'd just be so many people who might have thought of doing something like that, but they were discouraged or told not to, and also weren't let into those spaces.
Right.
And I mean, I think that's why there's not those collaborators. And there probably were, but they just weren't at that level, you know? So, and that's what's unfortunate about it. But I do think, and I also have to say, and I don't want to place gender on her so much, but I will say that Laurie Anderson is another figure for me that was genderless. I never really thought of her so much as female or male, and that's what it was appealing to me about them. Like, and I know that they don't identify in those ways, but I always felt like, oh, there's someone who doesn't care about that, and I think, and seemed to me from and my space in my room as a teenager. Yeah. Someone who could walk into a room and not let that affect it so much because they felt very comfortable and very confident in their space.
Right, and confidence.
And unfortunately, you have to have that in a world of sexism and misogyny to be able to do it, especially when you're collaborating with people who are misogynists. So
I didn't end up picking a lot of tracks where she's going back and forth between the voice of authority, the lower pitched voice, and but there is a lot of just great analysis and critique about sexism and gender in her work that's sometimes hidden and sometimes definitely not. The last little bit from this Tightrope song will kind of close out Bright Red.
Remember me is all I ask. And if remembered be a task, forget me. Remember me is all I ask. And if remembered be a task, forget me is long in life.
And do you feel like with that record, because I know revisiting it's making me feel this way, that now and as an adult, that's the one that really sticks out for me, along with the first United States Live, right? Would that be where you're at?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think that record, part of why I threw those two together is that there's both say "Remember Me" lyrically. And one of the things that I love about her whole body of work is that she's not afraid to repeat things across albums, in the same album, to tell stories again, to kind of oftentimes word for word to say, I like telling the story, so I'm going to tell it again. Or I like this line. So listening, really focusing on the lyrics on that record, it's like, oh, this is why that sounds familiar, because it's in 3 of the songs. Yeah. And so it's... I think appreciating that it's not a lack of ideas, it's a way to kind of reinforce these ideas that are great but also challenging. And so that's what I got from looking at the record again and listening to it again, was just that it is about death and memory and losing a parent and all these things that are not light topics. And so when you have Eno kind of laying the palette of, it's a more spacious record. It's definitely a little, there's kind of some creepy parts, quite a few, and it's, I think it works well as an album and as a whole. So
very good. And it makes sense, looking at artists and the way they do things. A lot of artists repeat things over and over again. We went to this gallery when we were in Missouri, and this guy's thing was tigers. And tigers were in all of his work, or there's other one was like these little stick people, and it was in everything, but they were just in different settings and things like that. So it makes sense. Art. Whoa.
Oh my God.
All right. So where are we at here? This is 1994. Was this record?
Yes.
That we just finished up?
We sure did.
All right.
There was a fairly long spoken word record called The Ugly One with the Jewels that came out, I think, in 95.
Okay.
We're not going to sample from that. Okay. But it is great.
All right.
So if you like the storytelling part, there's a lot of music and background that sounds very similar to what we just heard with the Eno piece.
Okay.
But that's also sections of what she took on the road. So a lot of the live performance with keyboard, with visuals, with violin is on that one. The next studio album was 2001.
Okay.
And it is called
Life on a String.
That's right.
Life on a String.
It's a lot more violin presence.
So what do we got? What are we listening to on this one?
So there's a couple more on the mix, but this is called One Beautiful Evening. and you'll hear a familiar friend come back, I believe.
One beautiful evening in the Garden of Eden, a snake came walking in the twilight. He was leaning on his ivory cane, and he said, "Let me tell you a little secret about life. There's a certain shark."
Somebody got the bass button and turned it up, the bass knob on that one.
Did you notice the returning guest?
Oh, the snake.
The snake is back, and the snake's got legs. He's coming to tempt you.
So I just wanted to make sure.
He's coming to tempt you. So there's a lot of beautiful stuff on that album. We are not going to dive into a lot of tracks on her later records. There were many years between that one and the next one, which is called Homeland.
Okay.
Which came out in 2010.
All right.
And this is a particularly different sounding track, which is why I just included a little bit of it. Lou plays guitar on this track, and this is called Only an Expert. And I believe it's like 7-8 minutes long.
Now, only an expert can deal with the problem, because half the problem is seeing the problem. And only an expert can deal with the problem. Only an expert can deal with the problem. So if there's no expert dealing with the problem, it's really actually twice the problem. Because only an expert can deal with the problem. Only an expert can deal with the problem.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
It's fun. I mean, it's also very sharp and biting. And there's a section about the bailout and the financial crash and some kinds of experts that that always manage to make it out okay, and other kinds of experts that don't.
Those people.
But it's a great one. So if you want to jump into any later works,
and I hadn't heard that one, and I actually was kind of intrigued.
Yeah, that's cool.
Pretty dancey.
And you can hear now the advance of technology. You know that now they can make music in computers and make it sound very clean and crisp and exactly how you want.
I was more curious sonically what she's doing there. Like, what is she up to with the things that she's now still been experimenting with forever, and how have they evolved? I'd like to see.
And the last record that we're going to just touch on is a epic experience, but it's called Landfall, and it was recorded with the Kronos Quartet.
Okay.
And it's about Hurricane Sandy, which destroyed a whole basement full of her equipment and work. I think Lou Reed's stuff was in a separate storage area, but this album came out in 2018. So Lou was already dead, I think. Anyway, I'm forgetting the timing of things.
I think he was 16.
So there's a lot of them playing strings together as a 5-piece. There's also some spoken word parts of this, and this won a Grammy.
Okay.
So it was a fun, serious experiment.
Let's have it.
This song is called Dreams.
Don't you hate it when people tell you their dreams? You know, they say things like, I had this dream, and there was this man, and he was my father. No, wait. He was my uncle. No, wait, he was my father. No, wait, I'm not sure. And you say, please don't tell me your dream. But they go on anyway.
So this is coming from someone who, I love her dearly. She spent much of her career in life telling me her dreams.
Yeah.
So which is partly what makes it hilarious. But you heard some of the thunder in the back. There's the second half of this record. There's great, crazy noises that they're making with, your standard string quartet. And so it's fun to listen to just for the sonic adventure too.
the string aspect of it.
Yep.
So Bryan, I think that's it.
Is that it?
That's it?
That's not really it. There's so much, as Andy said, there's so much to kind of delve into. And also understand, I know if I mentioned before that a lot of the performance, like Home of the Brave that he was mentioning, she directed that.
Okay.
And filmed it. So it was
okay.
So a lot of
Scorsese
these,
and Demi said, "Oh, why don't you just take care of that yourself?" And so she did.
Fantastic.
So she's also a filmmaker as well.
Okay.
She's got many hats, like too many to mention, really, to be honest. But you should definitely dive into it. And we're going to have lots of links that will be useful. So if you have some interest in some of these other avenues we're talking about, you can kind of more fully engage in them.
Link in.
Yeah.
There was a great... So Iggy Pop, they just did, there's, I guess, a Lou Reed World Tai Chi Day. So toward the end of his life, Laurie and Lou were both Tai Chi students.
Okay.
And so Iggy just did a day with Laurie where they went into Central Park and did Tai Chi together.
Fantastic.
I love that.
And there's just a whole, the last 2 decades, there's just lots of different kinds of adventures that we haven't even touched on.
Mm-hmm.
So
there's not many musicians that I've actually touched their hand, and she's one of them.
Oh.
How did that happen now?
Tell us
Well,
that.
my old boyfriend was a record collector, and when I saw the tour for the Nerve Bible, we waited because he wanted her to. She signed big signs, and she signed, I think, Strange Angels, and she was very, very kind. And I was just standing there because I've mentioned before, I'm not really someone who likes to meet famous people. It's just not my thing because I just feel uncomfortable, and I just don't think it's not a real point of entry, like on an even field. So I just feel kind of like, I'm just like, But she couldn't be more nice. Like I wasn't even I was just like, I just liked watching the interaction. I didn't really want to be engaged in it, but then she engaged me.
She reached out.
She did. She touched my hand.
Wow.
She's very nice.
That's fantastic.
She's a lovely person.
Okay. So there is a chance that one could go see her perform again. She's still out there performing, doing things under normal circumstances, of course.
There is a big retrospective at the Hirshhorn in D.C. that's supposed to happen at some point.
Okay.
Like decades of her work that's going to be more museum
quality, kind of go check it out, listen, experience, be part of it, but maybe performances potentially?
I don't know if there will be performances as part of that.
Okay.
But, she's always giving lectures,
she
and
probably would speak.
There's a lot of material that way and interviews that if you want to hear what she's up to, you can jump in and listen that way.
Well, hopefully one day this very podcast becomes part of a college class, just like you experienced, Andy, because I now have gotten a full appreciation of Laurie Anderson.
Now you got to go listen.
It's more than just a name to me in the back of my subconscious.
Good.
But I like that that's where she was, because it seems like that's appropriate for a person like her to be back there. So I am down. I'm ready to go. But obviously I need to set aside some time.
Yep.
To listen to one track that might be 8.5 minutes long,
or that 4.5 hours.
Or the 4.5 hours, we have to set that aside. But I'm ready. I'm in. I'm down. I'm glad that I can now sort of know who she is.
Yeah, and like we said, check out if you're interested in some of the things Andy's had to say, because he's a very interesting person. He has his band, The Lost Gospels, and you can listen to some music he's made.
For sure.
Which is definitely worth listening
to.
Yep.
And we're going to be...
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, podcasting. Very, very fun. I'm so glad you did this with me.
Yeah.
I don't think I could have done it without you. You were very integral to the part of it, because I would have just been like, I like that song. So thank you so much for bringing me some things I didn't know about it. So
Number one on the list for collaborations that we wanted to do. So glad that we were able to make it happen.
Thanks, guys.
Yes, thank you everyone for listening once again. I already told you that. As always, make sure that you listen to the mixes that will be on YouTube and Spotify that will be linked in the show notes. And go out and buy some music. These things are being re-released in some cases, or you can even go find them used. Go buy a record or two at your favorite shop.
Yeah, that United States Parts 1 through 4 was one of my prized possessions on CD. Just great to hold the big block, the big brick of music.
Any good record store you went to, you saw that behind the
with the light in her mouth looking at you as you're buying something that was like $17. You could spend whatever on that behind the counter.
Yeah. It was always up there like a little golden ticket.
Yeah.
Worth it just for that, for sure. So thanks again, Andy.
Thank you.
What do you want to go out on, Andy?
I would love to go out on From the Air from Big Science.
Great.
Here we
Funny
go.
and spooky.
That's how I like it. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Good evening. This is your captain. We are about to attempt a crash landing. Please extinguish all cigarettes. Place your tray tables in their up.